For me, it's such a pleasure, especially in a month of September when we celebrate and give thanks to women medical providers, to talk to another female medical clinician. And I'm going to dive in right away and ask you, what has been the most challenging about pandemic for you?
I think for me, it's the conflicting information that we get that filters down to the clinic. We're working outside and inside, and that's in constant flux. And so it's challenging to not have something be the same, even one day.
Yes, yes. Okay, so yeah, that's true. And the information you write from wherever sources, it changes so dramatically. And the roulette of even CDC putting the guidelines, the removing it the following day. How do you think this pandemic is different for men in medicine and women in medicine? Do you think that there is even a differentiation here?
Well, I think there's always been a differentiation between men and women in anything, but in medicine in particular. Yes, yes. I think it has, it's slowly changing. There's certainly a lot more women in medicine, but I think the overall corporate structure, and I work for a big corporation, is still very much male driven in that there are women on the boards and women in CEO positions within the company that I work with, but I think men and women are treated differently within that world.
Yep.
For example, something that a man can say he can get by with, whereas if you're a woman, then you're just considered to be difficult.
Yep. So, right. And this is probably across various branches of various professional, and not only professional, any settings that women and men work together or interact together. I think I started kind of in the middle. I want to introduce you now. How about that? In the middle of
It sounds good.
Why not? Doing it a little bit differently. So, Libby, you are physician assistant, a clinician.
Yes.
You are hands-on practitioner. As you said, we exchange a few email correspondences. You treat patients with various conditions, including COVID-19 screening and triaging and what's not. But you also have this huge passion, and your career evolved over the years into being more mindful of how you're doing things and also helping others to change, to transform, and to find the best in their life. Am I summarizing it pretty good, what you're doing with your website and with your magazine, Metamorphosis?
Yes, that pretty much sums it up. And I want to continue to be a clinician, so that really impacts the time that I have for, say, one-on-one coaching, but which I've done in the past. But I want to be able to have a bigger impact in doing things that can reach more people while still being able to work as a clinician. And so having the magazine actually draws in, like yourself, you contributed an article, draws in other people to share their thoughts, and not necessarily people who are in a coaching capacity, but basically the magazine is designed to inspire in a lot of ways. And so drawing on arts and music and health and mindfulness, people for positive change. So anything that inspires. And so I think it's been very helpful for me as the publisher and editor, but I think it reaches people in a larger way, in little digestive bites that they can carry with them and just read a short, even a passage of an article and get little bits of inspiration. And that's really the goal of this, is to just inspire people to be positive.
How did you find time truly and inspiration? What was for you the moment that you felt that this is time to do something different other than being a clinician?
I think that, and you understand this, I think anyone that's a clinician, the time we get to spend with patients is less and less and less. And so I think a lot of what brings people to the clinic in the first place is not necessarily their physical illness. but what's going on in the way that they think.
Mm-hmm.
And the approach that I have with people that I can't necessarily do in a clinic is to try to teach others that basically how we think and the focus that we put on our thoughts determines the kind of life we're going to have and our health, but all aspects of our life, really. And so this is a way that I can reach people in a larger sense that aren't patients of mine necessarily. I don't even know if there's, anyone in particular that is a patient that subscribes to the magazine.
Awesome. So, so you're looking for possibly, not only patients, but, anybody could be a patient. I mean, you and I are patients. So
right.
I think that there's this, concept of just, I'm going to like divide 8 to 5 or whatever hours you are a clinician, and then you go home and you are just this personal person, and it really doesn't work like that.
No, not at all. Not at all.
We bring so much with us from work, but also of us to work.
Yes, and I think it's difficult to turn off that ability as a clinician. You're always problem solving, and you can't ever just turn that off. You've honed that skill actually when you're or an engineer or a medical provider or whatever you do that's analytical. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes that can be helpful and sometimes not because we remain in our head and don't connect with what our spiritual self, which is the more important of the two, really.
That is true. You mentioned already that it's so important, the mental part of our lives. And I think that everything, with the well-being really starts with a healthy brain and healthy spirituality. And, whether it's I think about religion and faith and spirituality so much during pandemic. And I started wearing religious necklace every day, and I feel, I can't remove it. If I remove it, that's gonna be bad. I removed it once in the summer when I was swimming and I didn't want to attract sharks, but other than that.
Well, yeah, that's a good plan. They like shiny things.
Yeah, exactly, shiny, yes. What is your approach? Is it more religion, spirituality, faith? What do you think about this part that is emerging, especially in the pandemic?
Well, I grew up with a father who was an American Baptist minister. And so I got the chance to see religion and spirituality, and they don't always intersect. Mm-hmm. And so I have found in my adult life that I'm far more spiritual by not embracing dogma of a specific religion. Mm-hmm. Because I think as I've grown, I see that all religions have some merit, basically, and basically they all have some degree of thinking that we are larger than ourselves. And so I just don't subscribe to any particular religion, mm-hmm. but I'm a deeply spiritual person. Yeah. More so than I was when I was involved in religion, and you get tied up, at least for me, in the day-to-day operations of wherever you're going to mm-hmm. worship. So
right, that's interesting, the spirituality. And I think, and I see it so much in patients. I think that patients who have usually those are religious people very, and I like it, they should, and they identify with certain religion, and they say how much it helps them to overcome the crisis or guilt sometimes of the illness, of pain, and sometimes the loss, and it's really wonderful. But I think that there's something to be said about that. People who mention it, I really have high hope, and they often do very well. They do better, and they have this perspective that is very interesting, and it's somehow I try to channel into that. And that's my another question to you, about Metamorphosis. How do you came up with the name for the magazine? Because it's, and I think about you, I'm like thinking about you in a cocoon, and I see yes. like very messy Libby, and then there is something, and then there is a change. And I see you now, or maybe, you are still in a transitioning, but tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, it's hard to put a word or two to all the changes that go on in our um, spirituality and in our physical bodies and everything else. But I think that you perfectly described myself, and I think all of us, that when we're born, we're not born with all of this toxic thinking. We are in awe and wonder about everything. And then it doesn't take too long. We don't get too far out of our infancy before we start to just internalize these toxic ways of thinking. And so I think for myself, and I think it's true for others, is when you step out of that and look inward again as to who you really are, and not all this toxic thinking that you have going on in your brain, we do get the ability to transform dramatically. And I think that's how I came up with that name. I had
I was listening to mindfulness lecture from Brown University, and some of it says, how do you go from our nature being freeze, fight, or flight, or bite. I think she said bite, the lecturer, to mindful celebration of every moment, being in a moment, in a spirit, or I think there's like missing link to me. And I think there's a lot of resources, just as your magazine, how to go about this missing link. But if I met you when you were 20, Libby, what would be different about you? Because I'm really curious. How do you think it's a natural, or you didn't like yourself when you were 20?
I think I liked myself, but I didn't know myself. And so I think you absorb your surroundings, and I was very driven, intellectually. And, I was a very much less mature person and more influenced by my surroundings, I think. And I really didn't know myself. I had really gone very far from that happy little, young child.
Yeah. I know. Imagine, when I think about myself back in a medical school, and I often think, we should be thinking about choice of our career at age 40. And
Right.
often it's like, it's outrageous. How could I at age 19, in Poland, the medical system, schooling is a little bit different. You almost like connect medical school, college together. And it's about the same at the end of the day, amount of years.
Right.
Year prior to residency. But I think sometimes, wow, it's very different. I don't know if I would be brave enough right now to go to medical school, quite frankly.
Yeah, I don't know what I would have chosen. I mean, I love the science of medicine, but it can take a toll on your personal life if you allow it to.
Yeah.
I've gone through phases of my career where I did that, when I was in emergency medicine in particular. You work weird hours, and you neglect yourself, and you don't realize the toll it takes on you until you leave it.
Yeah. For sure. But there's also beauty and reward in it, I think. And in a time of pandemic, I think some of it is so sharp right now, the contrast in between, when I see some people that we celebrated. I mean, look back 12 months ago. Who were the people that we celebrated in a big way? And where are all these people? They actually, they're getting into all kind of troubles because they said this and that. And I think we know we always knew who our heroes were. But it feels good in a sense that finally there's a bit of a recognition of importance of research and science and this devotion rather than this fluff, because
Yeah, I agree.
although I love the fluff. You know what I'm watching right now? I'm rewatching one show over and over again, because when I get home, is you really want to almost take this spiritual wash, you know. So I'm watching this kind of brain candy show on one of the, you know, the major networks here. But I also want to connect back with our dear friend and such a beautiful person and such talented man, Steve
Yes.
Lyons. And you guys co-created this beautiful book that is about to be published with his art. Can you tell me in a few sentences about this project?
Yes. Basically, I wanted to create an art book of Steve's work combined with basically short, little digestible, inspirational messaging so that it wouldn't just be techniques of his artwork, which what an art book usually is, but using visuals as well as text to turn the reader inward. And it's really designed to open to any page. It has a number of quotes from well-known philosophers and spiritual leaders and my reflections on them, as well as really short narrative at the beginning of each chapter. And so there are almost, I think there are 59 of Steve's images, 60 if you count the cover. And so it's a visual feast for sure. But it's designed to turn people inward, which is really where we find the answers for everything. That's where the change comes from. And so I really appreciate Steve collaborating with this.
It sounds so beautiful. I am so looking forward. So it's going to be available very soon. Is it available already?
October 30th is the publication date, and then I'm sure it will be on Amazon and a whole lot of other places, but Amazon's usually the easiest place to find it. Yeah, initially, I will give links as to where it can be found elsewhere.
Yes.
So we're not just tied to Amazon.
Two little guys that are
Yes.
shrinking, you know, we're shrinking comparing
Yes.
to Mr. Bezos.
Yes.
I said it. Bad me. So it was so awesome, Libby. I am so happy that we met through Steve. You know, Steve is such a catalyst, I guess. Yes,
Yes, for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
His art is so beautiful, and I also interviewed him, and I hope for the best for him in very difficult time in his life.
Yes, he's facing his challenges, but as is typical with Steve, he takes it head on.
Yes, I'm going to let him know about when I edit and post this interview that we were gossiping about him a little bit in a very good way.
I've known Steve my whole life, really. We grew up down the street from each other. And,
yeah, I love the picture you sent me of him and you when you guys were young. I love it.
Creative writing class.
Yeah,
of all things.
That's such an awesome picture. Libby, thank you so much. I hope you have a beautiful day and that you enjoy your family life and your work and that you're balancing beautifully. And thank you so much again.
Thank you. Nice talking with you, as always.